Hi guys, I have a couple of books I wanted to talk about today, and one of them is, they're actually reviews. One of them is this one. It's Public Philosophy, Essays on Morality and Politics by Michael J. Sandel. And I think I actually forgot to show this one in my last book haul since I had already started reading it. So I think this is the first time it's showing up on the channel. I was first introduced to Michael Sandel a couple of years ago. Some of you might know of him too, from the lectures he has up on YouTube. I was looking for a productive way to spend my newly free summers when I didn't have anything to do. So I stumbled across the Harvard University page, and I think he has his own page up. And he offers this course at Harvard called Justice. And it's one of the fastest classes in the entire history of Harvard University where Michael Sandel is a professor of government to fill up. I think 1,000 or 1,200 people sign up for the course every year in less than 15 minutes. So, that's not really something you have to worry about if you're watching it on YouTube, but I thought that was kind of a testament to how good a teacher he is, or how interesting the content must be. The lectures are, for anyone who's interested in watching them, they're still up. They're filmed in this enormous lecture hall with over 1,000 students in it, I think. And they're full of students who would probably never think of really necessarily majoring in something like philosophy, but are still interested in the deep, meaningful questions that philosophy can bring to the table. Like, what does it mean to be a citizen in a democratic society, and how does one pursue the good life in a world of such a large number of competing interests, and stuff like that. There's this kind of searching quality to the way that he teaches classes, and he has this really open, interactive, maieutic learning method that he goes about with his students that I think is really one of the best parts of watching and interacting with the lectures. And it's really kind of that same Socratic spirit that he brings into this book, which is mostly a series of previously published essays, but I think a couple of them may be standalone, and this might be the first time that they were published. But Sandel's willingness and his insistence on being sort of a knowledgeable tour guide through the history of liberal political theory is a really sincere and really appreciated one, just as it is in his lectures. However, some of the pieces are just too short, both in length and in moral force, to merit inclusion in what otherwise would have been a really extremely wonderful collection. Most of the short pieces that I'm talking about are included in part 2, which is called Moral and Political Arguments. These are articles, and I'll use that word instead of the word essay, because they're almost more article-like, and it pains me to say it, they're almost more like op-ed pieces than they are well-considered, fleshed-out philosophical arguments. And they mostly discuss the relative merits and demerits of, state lotteries, advertising in public classrooms, the morality of buying and selling pollution credits, affirmative action, the Clinton imbroglio, etc. Obviously, some of them are a bit dated, but they were pretty much written while the discussions were still hot. In fact, he tells you that some of them were written in the 90s when the public debate was still very much heated. The lengths of the pieces, and this is the most interesting thing about the book, the lengths of the pieces are pretty proportional to their quality. That is to say, the longer pieces are really great. The short pieces, the ones that are 2 and 3 pages, are pretty abysmal. The opening essay, which is called America's Search for a Public Philosophy, which is on pages 9 to 34, so a 25 or 26 page long essay, is really, really good, and it sets the tone and sort of informs the body of concerns that resurface throughout the book. namely our shift away from a kind of communitarian liberalism toward a more rights-based, autonomy-based, voluntarist liberalism in which the state is value-neutral. Michael Sandel doesn't really like the idea of the state being value-neutral. He thinks that the state needs to have moral positions that it stands up for. This first essay actually seems to be a sort of a distillation of his book called Democracies Discontent. I'm only vaguely familiar with that book, but the topic seems to be pretty much the same, so I'm guessing it's sort of a summary of the whole book. The best essays point to some of the contradictions that reside within liberal political theory. Liberalism in the broad philosophical sense, not in the narrow sense that pundits that you see on TV use the word. For example, is toleration, is toleration in itself a good thing if the thing being tolerated is morally dubious? Say like the toleration of the neo-Nazis marching in Skokie, Illinois. In other words, what's more morally fundamental? What's more morally important? Is it the toleration itself, or the inherent goodness or badness of the thing being tolerated? Sandel is right, I think, to point out that rudimentary questions like this are rarely present in times when when conversations like this are actually taking place in public discourse. There are two more essays: Dewey's Liberalism and Ours, and Political Liberalism, which is a discussion of the readings and some of the misreadings Dewey has incurred since his death, and a critical discussion of John Rawls, respectively, that are really both worthy of attention and both really good. In fact, Dewey's influence on Sandel seems to me to loom rather large. Both are extremely concerned with the cultivation of a democratic citizenry and what precisely this would entail. Both are also clearly disenchanted with the rights-based voluntarist liberalism that I mentioned earlier that's come to be almost unquestioned in the United States over the last century or so. While some of the shorter pieces here, as I said, come to the conclusions that you would expect of someone of Sandel's philosophical stance, which is that of a sort of Deweyan, communitarian liberal bent, who values goods before rights, the longer pieces that I mention are really good places to see the various ways in which philosophy dovetails into practical, pragmatic, political concerns. They're really consistently thought-provoking and critical of the liberal tradition within political philosophy when that's necessary. The short articles, while not totally worthless, are more cursory and maybe of interest to those with only a passing or historical level of interest, but they don't provide the intellectual sustenance that you can find in some of the longer pieces. So read the longer pieces, and if you want to, don't read the rest, but the long pieces are pretty interesting. Michael J. Sandel's Public Philosophy, Essays on Morality and Politics.